Hey there, welcome to the better quality, action packed sequel to last Saturday's Neoliberal Power Hour. Oh, I'm going to make sure our audio is good and then we can start our adventure and our grand master plan and intentions and all that wonderful stuff. Let me make sure. Give it a little peek. All right, working. Excellent. Yeah, because I finally figured out the issue here with the audio, and it was kind of crazy because people get these devices and these various things to make the audio better. So for it to act even worse with that device implemented, I mean, it's outrageous. But listen, I promised a funeral, and so we're gonna have it. Now, if you haven't seen either of the uploads from yesterday or the streams from yesterday, you'll know that my Twitter account was suspended. My Twitter account was suspended yesterday. They gave no reasons. What more can I say? I used to post on there all the time, but they threw me out, and I'm left with my rhyme. It came out of nowhere, out of the blue. My account is gone, and I don't know what to do. It was so disappointing. I even felt myself cringe. I would say some more words, but they'd be considered fringe. I went on another website and expressed my disdain, but then I realized that anger was just to hide the pain. I couldn't believe that they yanked me overnight. They didn't hear what I wanted to say or let me have a fair fight. Now that the funeral's over, and you'll be able to catch that on the replay, presumably if you check this out afterward. Let's go into our wonderful neoliberal peanut gallery. So, for the two people that didn't watch the Democratic debates, which I'm sure, I mean, those got views that are just wow, millions. It was pretty crazy. Um, there was a moment at the beginning where a wonderful, talented, awesome politician from Texas. I use all those words sarcastically, except for the Texas part. By the name of Beto O'Rourke, decided to speak in Spanish in his introductory message. And one of the contestants who was equally, let's just say, not progressive, by the name of Cory Booker, his last name mixed up with something else oftentimes, um, gave him a, like this sort of a surprised or just this little side eye appearance thing. But this goes viral, and people start posting it all over Twitter and all these other websites. I didn't get to see that much of it because it was literally, I'd say, what, a day and a half before my stuff got yanked on there on Twitter. So I didn't see the full blowout of this, but I did get to see the interview that he gave in response to this, and I think it's worth a look. So let's check it out. Let's play that magical, wonderful CNN footage, because anything from CNN is high quality stuff.
We've heard tonight from New York Mayor Bill de Blasio and Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar. Now, another candidate who, like several debaters tonight, demonstrated his Spanish fluency. Take a look.
La situación ahora es inaceptable. Este presidente ha atacado, ha demonizado los inmigrantes. Es inaceptable. Voy a cambiar este. On day one, I will make sure that, number one, we end the ICE policies and the customs and border policies that are violating the human rights.
Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey joins us now. Senator Booker, thanks for being with us. How do you think it went tonight for you?
I'm really excited. I think it went really well and got us to have an opportunity to have a first conversation.
Also, I just wanted to point out this person has been polling at below 5% in, I believe, every single state with the exception of maybe New Jersey for the last, He's been running for president since February. So since February, he's been polling. Since he got in the race, he's been just down there in the bottom of the race. And it's actually kind of disturbing that that's not even technically that horrible when you consider how many people are in this race, where a lot of them aren't even getting 1%. So, it's a backhanded compliment at best on my part.
About a lot of major issues. And for me, and right now we have a lot of folks who are just discovering me. Our name recognition is now just rising. So I'm pretty pleased with how it went, and we're going to continue the conversation hard on the campaign trail.
You obviously tried to make some significant contrasts in terms of not just politics.
So one of the reasons people don't know who he is because he doesn't lead on any issue. The one issue I've seen people try to say that he's supposedly good on is criminal justice reform. And like I said, I hate that word, the last part, reform, because everyone has their own idea of how something needs to be fixed. So if someone comes up to you and you think that when they say, I'm going to overhaul or reform the criminal justice system, and you're, let's say, opposed to the drug war like myself, and then instead all they do is let out 1,000 random convicts and call that reform, it's kind of not the same thing. You're using the same words, but they don't have the same impact or otherwise conclusion. But again, that's a nice little way of speaking politically that they go out of their way to implement in their vernacular, so that when they actually do double cross you and do something that nobody wanted, now they can go, well, I never technically said I would do this, so you can't get too mad at me, right? It's like, no, we can get pissed at you because you knew what we wanted, and we've had polling to support our position of being something that people want in excess. So for you to pretend like it wasn't a thing, it's kind of insane.
Policy, but sort of energy and life experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've dedicated my entire life to fighting for communities that are too often left out and left behind. I'm the only person, not only in this race, but also in the United States Senate, that lives in a low-income Black and brown community. And I've lived there for about 20 years, dedicating my life to the issues of folks in this country where the economy is not working for them, from housing policies to environment.
This is what is so wonderful about this candidate. So I would think if someone likes the fact that they live in a particular community, they wouldn't try to use it for their and I get annoyed by this when anybody does this. These people want us to fall in love with them, so they feel the need to give us these like personal stories that do, while they might have some impact on why their position is such a way, you really don't need to give who you are to just support a particular position. Take, for example, what just happened here. No one asked him about why what city he lives in or what community he lives in or how many candidates live in that particular, because nobody cares, because there are plenty of people who live in certain places that do not empathize and or represent the people of that place. Why the hell do you think all of these different members of Congress, they always have some group of people that live in their state or their respective, if they're a member of the House district, opposing them for reelection? Because that person who's opposing them, whether they're another candidate, in the most extreme cases, or just supporting someone else, does not feel they're being represented by the idiot who's saying, well, I live in this community and we're very much like, no, you live there, but you're not representing the people there. And as far as him trying to like fight and change things, I love how he brought up how, and this wasn't in his immediate remark that I'm responding to, but he mentions in the clip that was played, being opposed to the Trump immigration policy. And I've already stated I'm not a fan of it. But here's the thing. Obama deported more immigrants, or illegal immigrants rather, than any president before him. And Booker was in the Senate and, mayor of Newark before that, while this was going on. Not a single word of opposition. You know why that is? Because Booker, like all the other Democrats that are running this time around, except for Sanders, are cowards and really pawns of the DNC. So they won't take a position that is not atypical of their party. Now also let me just cut my own remark. I said only Sanders out of the people that are running are not pawns of the DNC. I should have said Gabbard as well, because she resigned her seat to endorse Sanders in his previous presidential campaign. So I have to give her credit for, actually doing something that was against the norm. But you get the point that, he wants to present himself as being this thing when his own record does not go along with that. And also, being a member of a community doesn't mean that you're actually representing. You just happen to live there.
Environmental injustice. And so I've taken on the toughest problems and shown through my leadership that we can make major changes, in fact, turn things around if we bring people together to solve them. And that's the way that I'm going to fight this election to beat Donald Trump. And that's the way I'm going to govern. It's the way I always have.
You were the only one in the group who didn't raise your hand when asked who would sign back onto the 2015 Iran deal. You said you'd want to renegotiate and leverage a better deal. That puts you, I guess, closer to President Trump in some sense than your fellow Democrats.
No. First of all, let's be clear. He was wrong to pull out of the deal. It was an imperfect deal, but to pull out of a deal where we stand with our allies and have transparency into the Iran nuclear enrichment program.
I made a mistake. I clicked that too many times. I was trying to turn them off so badly. I was trying to escape. I really hate all these. I've said this before. I am not a fan of the Obama era. And I've made that clear a couple of times, but one of the few things he did that was great was the Iran deal, because it was a very strict negotiation on the US's part, and by extension his part, that said, hey, we're going to be able to go into your nuclear testing sites with this bipartisan group. I'm forgetting, I'm blanking on their name, but they went over there, they check out the nukes, and then they give a report. It was a great deal. And I guess what bothers me is that I see all these people are talking about, well, we gave Iran this, we gave Iran that. That's the point of having a negotiation or a deal. One side gives something, one side gives the other. In that particular deal, Iran gave a whole bunch more than we did. So every time I see someone who says the deal was flawed or it was bad, it's like, did you even read the damn thing? So let's continue.
It pushed it back 10, 20, 25 years. Because he did that, now we stand alone, we're isolated against our allies, and Iran is pushing towards a nuclear weapon. So we need to find a way to use diplomacy to solve this problem, not the war beat that he's doing, but I'm not.
Hey, you know how we can find diplomacy to solve this problem? Re-enter the deal. Like literally every single other country that signed up for that agreement is still in there. We're the only one who pulled out. And as I've said before, two consequences of that: it makes the U.S.'s word look like trash, because who the hell's going to want to sign an agreement with a president of the United States if the next one from the opposing party rips it up once they get inside, once they take over? And also, because all those other countries are still in that agreement, we look like a rogue state that doesn't, just does whatever it wants. We actually, and I was talking about how the U.S. likes to project its own, evils of its government on the other countries. They're trying to characterize Iran as this hostile, horrible threat and blah, 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 blah. But I don't see Iran pulling out any deals. I don't see Iran talking about, you better get back in this or we're going to they're not the ones who are being aggressive here. We are. Still too stupid to realize it, though.
I'm not going to stand up in a primary stage and announce that I'm going to unilaterally or de facto go right back into that deal. I'm going to do everything I can to try to get everything off the negotiating table that I can. Again, we need to go into a situation like that with all options on the table and a strong negotiating position. What will Iran think if somebody who already said they're going to go back into the deal becomes president of the United States? They're going to say, well, you said you'll do it, get back in that deal. No, we got to be thoughtful about this. And I really think that the next president should go back to diplomacy, but should not, and stop this drumbeat towards war, but do it with every piece of leverage they can to get the most off the table as possible.
You also talked about the criminal.
Dude, these people act, man, I wish they would just talk like normal people. Okay, so if his logic is, if I commit to the deal before winning this election, they're going to expect me to want to get into it. Yeah, because you said you would do it if that was the case, but he's not presenting really any kind of alternative. This is basically elect me and then I'll give you a full plan later on. It doesn't work that way. And that's why his campaign is failing completely, because You're not given any specifics on what needs to be done. He's talking about leverage and what? Like, you had the leverage. It was called the Iran deal, and your president pulled out of it, and then you're too stupid as the think how insane this is, right? You're running as the opposition to the president of the opposing party. You can go down the list of presidential candidates throughout history. They've always, for the most part, they're major candidates like senators and governors. All of them have usually been smart enough to run as the, again, not actually have completely different policies and practice, but to run as the complete polar opposite of whatever is currently there. So if Trump says, I'm going to pull out of this agreement, say I'm going to pull back into it. If Trump says, I'm going to cut EPA regulations, say I'm going to put them back, just stuff like that. It's so simple and basic, and it's rudimentary politics and really just common sense if you're trying to win, usurp an incumbent. But he's on his own little weird thing. So, oh,
Justice reform bill, something you've been working on obviously for a long time. It's interesting because the president mentioned that bill in a tweet earlier today. It's something he's going to try to run on in 2020 as well, despite his history in New York with the Central Park Five.
Well, look, he has a pretty sad history, not only of overt expressions of racism and bigotry, but that bill that he's going to be bragging about has large components of bills that I wrote. Everything from ending solitary confinement for juveniles on a federal level to even lowering mandatory minimum, something I was fighting for long before he became president of the United States. But again, I admit I worked across the aisle. We got this done. That's something I see as a point of pride. But I also see it as just the beginning, because we still have a profoundly unjust criminal justice system, and he should know. Because as Brian Stevenson says, we have a criminal justice system that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. And men like him have been abusing this system and abusing the rights of not only African Americans, but frankly, the over-incarceration of women, of people who are mentally ill, the over-incarceration of the poor. And so I'm going to fight.
Okay, so when he mentions the poor and the mentally ill, that's probably accurate. I just kind of got a little weirded out when he said the over-incarceration of women. If they've committed crimes that, they've been proven and found guilty of, what the hell does what's between their legs have to do with, them? You get the picture. Just, I hope that was just a slip up on his part. I'll give him, some kind of leeway there, because I don't think that doesn't make sense to me that would be an issue. Like, oh my God, you have a taco, can't go to jail. So he brings up that there are still more issues relating to the criminal justice system. And again, there are. And in another one of those very few slim instances where I'm forced to compliment politicians that I'm not a fan of, he actually admits what those issues are. Just right there, he says them all really quickly. But the thing that gets me is that he tries to brag about the First Step Act, which is this bill that passed late last year, that they're all touting as criminal justice reform. And I had said at that time, and I still say today, that the main reason Trump got behind it was that he could signal his support for it and then go around bragging about how he had, made this comprehensive, fundamental system change to, the way we incarcerate people and our way of punishment works. Whereas with the Democrats, they were thinking, oh, well, this is just the beginning of a major thing we're going to eventually get to. So they basically fell into that trap. And when Booker sits here and says, this bill was mostly composed of stuff that I wrote, or, I played some big part in it, you're treading dangerous waters, because again, you found yourself tied back to him, and you're supposed to be running as the polar opposite if you're trying to be the current person in there.
Take this a lot further. I'm happy that I was able to show that I can get progress in a divided Senate, but I'm going to show as president that I can end mass incarceration once and for all and do important things like bring police accountability in our country, so we do not have that kind of implicit racial bias that's so hurting our criminal justice system.
Senator Booker, I just want to ask, and on a slightly lighter note, and I'm asking this as someone who's occasionally been caught rolling his eyes on camera. There's a photo of you looking at Beto O'Rourke as he is starting to speak in Spanish. You're giving him kind of amazing side eye, and I wonder if you've seen the photo, what was going through your mind in that moment, if you can remember?
I can't really remember. I just knew he had laid a gauntlet down, and I was talking a little bit with Castro. Both he and I knew, as people who can speak Spanish, that now we were going to bring it as well. But I can't remember exactly what I was thinking in that moment. I just was saw him pull it out, and I realized that there's a lot of bilingual people, some even trilingual in this race, and I'm happy to have those skills.
Yeah, Senator Booker, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very.
I'm glad that's over. It's kind of crazy too, because in this CNN clip, they actually have another 4 minutes of material. I was sitting there watching. I was like, man, come on. I'm not even halfway through this. Oh, Lord. But in response to this picture thing, it's another one of those little incidents that really, I expect memes and various little jokes to be made online because we're all people that circulate the web. But what I don't expect is for a news network that wants me to take it seriously to, make it seem as if this was some big deal, because it isn't. It's a thing that people who are, online thought was funny and, made a little meme. But it just because they talk about it doesn't mean you have to. Let's go over to this other clip of another person who's benefited from this wondrous performance. I like how last time I actually had all the clips just posted here, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna have the take the time to look and choose and pick whenever I want to put this up here. So the main thing that people are talking about when it comes to that stupid debate was or rather is, I don't even know which words I'm using anymore so early. The moment where Harris, brought up that she was part of the second class of busing or whatever during, Biden's tenure in the Senate, and how he opposed this and this affected her. And, just as a spoiler warning, because I usually, what I try to do is let them talk. And then if you've never seen my stuff before, you kind of get the position I have through the manner by which I respond to it. Wow, this is so much stuff they put up here. This is crazy. Okay, let's go this week and then see what's there. I don't want to type Matthew's name in, but it looks like I'm going to have to do that. But going back to what I was saying, I've tried to make it that way because I want people who don't have a complete understanding of what my positions are, which I know as most people, to basically be able to get it as it goes along, just context clues. And as someone that knows her record of being, trying to portray herself as some hard nails cop that was in favor of incarcerations and, just the standard tough on crime, republicanism crap that a lot of these modern Democrats play, neoliberals. It's kind of hard for me to feel like it's really that sympathetic, especially since, because, Biden has a whole bunch of stuff you can go after him for. You can go after him for the Iraq War vote, this crime bill, just plenty of different things. Supporting the Patriot Act, dude, loads of stuff. But she doesn't do that. She has to reach back all the way to something from many decades ago. And what I guess the thing you've got to understand, because it's hard to really make this critique without people losing their minds. I'm not defending his role in that thing at all. You have to understand that one of the few things that progressives and neoliberals agree on is that matters, being against people of various races is wrong. That's something that even the most Republican light of Democrats usually back. So, she picks that issue because it's something that appeals to both progressives and neoliberals. And she ignores, again, his support for Iraq, support for the surveillance state, support for the banks. She completely ignores those issues because they are hot button topics that for which there still exists a sizable or meaningful segment of Democrats who still support those views. And she knows that most of them are donors and people that are wealthy that can gift their campaign, of that ilk, basically. So let me go over here and finally pull this thing off. Here it is.
My prescriptions used to be really expensive.
Watch this wonderful ad. This is where I'm supposed to plug in for you people to go on Patreon and give me enough donors so I can get on what is that, YouTube Premium, whatever that thing is called, the one where there's no ads. Well, that was one of my former Twitter comrades reacting to some stuff that happened. All right, so now we're ready to watch Kamala's wonderful suck-off interview after her debate performance. So grab your popcorn, get a drink. Oh, this should be good.
Is the message I think Biden was trying to use to explain his behavior with the segregation of senators. But you were there with regard to busing. And you talked tonight in that debate about the hurt you felt when you heard him talking about his in fact, to some extent praising the civility of these old seggies. What was the hurt?
Listen, if those men, those segregationists had their way, I would not be a member of the United States Senate. And I certainly would not be a serious candidate for president of the United States. And so the harm that they did and that they attempted to do, because frankly, they built not only their careers, but their reputation off of that, which is their quest to ensure the segregation of the races. Had they their way, there's so much that would not have happened. Lester Holt would not have been asking questions on that stage. Barack Obama would not have been in the position to appoint Joe Biden vice president of the United States. So the consequences of their actions were very real and on the shoulders of a history in our country of really a very bad, awful, dark, dangerous, and lethal time. So, but I have to tell you, Chris, I otherwise have a great deal of respect for Joe Biden. I do not believe he's a racist, but his perspective on those senators was something that was hurtful. And
man, I am so astonished how people can even fall for this. Like my opinion of the US population just went down even further. You watch her on this stage give this, admittedly, as someone that is not a fan of hers, forceful, emotional reaction to his comments about working with, I forgot what the senators' names are. Excuse me. Most people don't even know their names, so it's all good. I know one of them was Eastland, who is, like I said in my other video about this, a very significant member of Congress that is worth mentioning and talking about just outside of this context. But the point is that she rebukes him, and she's got this really strong, what you did was wrong kind of like authority to it, right? You get her off the stage, and she starts doing that same neoliberal pivot. Well, I'm not saying that he is a bad guy, but what he said hurt me because, it's like, no, why can't you just come out and say this comment is a relic of the past like him, which is why he should not be the nominee of our party. You should vote for me because I understand these issues. So simple, so easy. But because she is a DNC bot, she refuses, because let's be real, regular people don't care if these any of these candidates criticize each other. That should be very evident from my former site of Twitter. People are on there ripping each other's face off every day. Metaphorically, of course. I don't want those comments to be misinterpreted because people love to spin stuff. But the point is that no regular people would care if she said, Biden is not is out of touch, can't understand the implications of his comments because he didn't, go through this. And look, I'm not one of those people that believes you have to go through something to get that it's awful and to call it out and condemn it and to understand the brutality of it. But she apparently thinks that people who don't, that are going to be afraid if she just outright says, "You'll make a crappy nominee. Don't vote for him." And this is one of the reasons that you saw tonight. God, man, it's literally like being in a fight with a bear, and then grabbing it by its weak spot, like whether it's the tail or the ear or something, and then the bear is just like cowering and tucking, and you can either finish it off or you can maybe turn it in. Just you can do whatever it's at your leisure, and you look in the bear's eyes, and they start getting watery, and you look back at them and you release the bear and it claws you right back in the stomach and then you're right back where you started. Man, see again, this is why I don't support these people, because they don't have convictions. Like your whole point was you're upset with him for comments he made that were not negative about these senators, but then you can't just say these are crappy comments, this is why I'd make a crappy nominee. You don't even have to call him racist or whatever. Just say these gaffes are indicative of him screwing it up for us, past this next, DNC, Democratic National Convention. Could have just simply said that, but too stupid. So let's continue. I know I'm trying to make sure I don't say let's continue over and over. I'm attempting to work on that.
And it had consequences.
In the picture tonight, we saw you turn to him, look him in the eye, and almost in a way that a prosecutor has to point a finger at a defendant and said, "You did these things." It was very dramatic.
Well, I mean, I felt that. Look, going back to when I was a young girl, I mean, everything I said on that stage is the truth. I grew up where the kid next door said she couldn't play with us anymore because we were black. What I said about...
You feel that still? Do you feel that memory?
Of course I do. It's the memory of a child who felt pain. I mean, I have gotten beyond it, and obviously, but I didn't let it cripple me. But it is a, listen, it is a real emotion that a child feels based on a fact that these issues are real in our country, and we have to speak truth about it. And so that's what I was attempting to do, is speak the truth. And in a way that is also about hopefully conveying that the consequences are not only about what is wrong morally and legally, with a perspective that is about segregation as an example, but the consequences are also very painful emotionally. There was a young woman who came up to me after the debate.
I'm sorry, I just started falling asleep, and I don't blame the person who left. I really wish these people would just get to the point. We get it. What happened to you was bad. We don't need to hear an anecdote about someone that was on the stage or someone that Just say, these are my experiences. This is why my view is this way. That's why I don't agree with him. This is why I think should happen to his candidacy. And that could have been the whole interview. But everything's got to be drawn out for some reason.
And she said, "I'm glad that you brought that up because I was also bused. And it was also hurtful for me to hear those comments." So...
Have you, and this is really important to people.
Yeah, she wasn't the only person that was bused. We already know that. So what was the point of throwing that comment in there?
All backgrounds and ethnicities. I don't like the word race, ethnicities.
Right.
How did you come out of that and not have hatred towards white people generally?
No,
I'm just asking, because you talked about being a kid and having other kids being kept off as friends because their parents looked at you as someone else.
Well, but most Americans do not conduct themselves that way, and most parents don't conduct themselves that way. So there was no need to create a broad application because of that one experience.
So,
but we cannot deny that there are many children, Black children in America, who have had that experience. Children of color who have had that experience, be they Latino, Asian, or Black. That has happened. That happens in America.
Watching former Vice President tonight, do you feel that he had an adequate answer to you emotionally, intellectually, historically, to what you were raising tonight?
What the hell kind of question is that? Let's replay that. Like I want to just make sure I understood what was being said.
Adequate answer
In America.
watching former Vice President tonight, do you feel that he had an adequate answer to you emotionally, intellectually, historically to what you were raising tonight?
Emotionally, historically, and there was another one. Just what in the world? And when you go on these stations, they just parade you with questions. And I guess what gets me is that a lot of times the questions feel like, so if you ask a senator, do you support this legislation? And if so, if not, why not? If so, why? You know, I think that's appropriate when you have someone come off a debate stage and you start asking them about, you know, whether you think the response by the other person was good or great. I mean, what is she going to go and slap Biden because she thought his answer wasn't correct or wasn't good, or is she going to call him a lying scumbag because she didn't like his answer? Like, you know, those two things are going to happen, and at most she's going to say, "I didn't like his answer because X, Y, and Z. I liked his answer because X, Y, and Z." And then we're never going to hear about, you know, that particular question being asked ever again. So, what was the point of even asking it? And they're just really strange.
I think that I would like to hear him acknowledge what was wrong about a perspective on busing. That was a perspective that I believe he had at that time.
Yeah.
Listen, we were all, busing was part of what was necessary to integrate the schools of America. And to then fall back on, well, what's the state's responsibility versus the federal government? That leaves the need to really address the fact that it was just wrong.
Right.
And it dispenses with also the relevance of the federal government to step in on civil rights issues where states have failed,
Right.
Which is why we had the Civil Rights
felt he was
Act
hedging.
and the Voting Rights Act.
You felt he was hedging.
Well, we have a different perspective on it.
Okay. Brian Williams has a thought. So also, Nicole.
This is like, this should be part of some introductory video to the Democrats. Just weak as hell. You can't just say, I think his answer was wrong. I think his response was wrong. I think everything he said relating to this topic was just out of line and not really accurate at all. Because that would hurt his feelings, not be considered mean. So you have to say, well, we just happen to have a different perspective on the matter. It's like that's antithetical to the point you were trying to make. Like, I want you to understand, she's trying to make it seem as if this issue affects her on a personal level. It's something that's gripped her because of her experiences growing up and whatnot. You can't let that be something that we can actually believe, like in trying to give you the benefit of the doubt based off of your own answer to this stuff. Like, no person who thinks what he said was so outrageous, which is what she tried to characterize his comments as, is going to go, but I guess at the end of the day, we just have a difference of opinion. Like, no real person would do that. Except Senator Harris. Let's proceed.
Whilst you're in New York.
Hey, Senator, it's Brian. If Vice President Biden had handled it differently, used different language, would we be having this conversation? If he had said, I was one of 100 and I couldn't overturn the election results in the southern states of the people I serve with, but our job was to pass laws. Do you, for example, respect all of the personal and legislative histories of your 99 colleagues in the Senate today?
Brian, I find it difficult to relate the reputation and history and actions and words of those two individuals with my colleagues today. I strongly believe that there is not one member of the United States Senate currently who is a segregationist.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm talking about when I say there's like a selective outrage with things. Am I glad that none of these senators appear to be segregationists? Absolutely. Is it correct for her to say that, what they were for is so much more worse than what multiple members of the Senate are for currently. Absolutely not. We have actually I think almost a majority who support a literal genocide in Yemen that has again killed over 85,000 children, and it's been going on for 4 years under presidents from both parties. And for some reason, because that's not on U.S. soil, people don't care about it, and for that reason, she's able to, really ignore it and also pretend like. I hate how like with this thing with Americans where they act like if it's not happened to them, it's not on the same caliber. Like think of all these different wars we've had that have killed millions of people, both from the U.S. and from other countries. Just in our pursuit of policing the world, that have been voted for by these different senators multiple times. Like forget, a lot of people say, okay, Iraq was a mistake. I messed up. You have people to this day, like Tom Cotton or Cruz, still beating the war drum at every instance, just smacking that thing, just going all out for it, no matter what. Like I'm really crazy for noticing that they would rather sit here and try to tell you that all the current senators are better than the ones from the past because they happen to not have one crappy worldview. They have a completely other terrible one, which includes aiding and abetting a genocide. Whatever.
I can't make that leap.
I'll give you that one concerning their personal histories. And one question before I hand off to Nicole that has to do with your seat on the Intelligence Committee. The president, prior to leaving for Osaka, said it was none of our business what he was going to talk about with Putin. I saw a veterans group say today, you're flying on our plane, you live in our house, it's very much our business. Do you have concerns all over again for another meeting between those two happening just about the time we're having this conversation?
I do. I mean, this president has a track record of acting in a unilateral way, of not reading the briefing book, of not consulting with the leaders of our military, the leaders of our State Department, diplomats. He has a tendency to engage in foreign affairs in a way that's about his personality and ego. So he likes that the North Korean dictator flatters him with a letter, and he decides to elevate the North Korean dictator with a photo op and a summit of sorts. And then to take the word of the North Korean dictator over the word of the American intelligence community when it comes to an American student who was tortured and later died. We have a president of the United States who, by the way, is the commander-in-chief, who also prefers to take the word of a Russian president over the word of the American intelligence community when it comes to the Russian.
Yeah, I've said it before. I could not care less if Trump listens to any of those idiots at the CIA or an intelligence community or whatever the hell, because all those pricks are the same ones who have led us into every single conflict we've ever been in. As far as the parts about him making a comment that it's none of our business of him in this meeting with this other world, that's a dumb comment that he made that they're pouncing on. But like I said, I don't really like stuff like that. Is flash in the pan. It's not. He's made a bunch of comments that were weird since he's been in office. The issue that needs to be articulated are problems with his policies, which actually have an impact on people's lives. I don't care if he went on Twitter and said that, someone needs a facelift or whatever the hell. But these different hosts at news groups like MSNBC love to prop that stuff up because it gives their little stupid Democratic candidates a chance to go, Trump said something that was very unpresidential and he should apologize, and it made me piss myself because it was so mean, and he's like a bully. Ironically enough, they start making comments that are kind of similar to the stuff he's saying, except in a more professional way, if you can even call it that. But all of this is part of their little process. They just brought Harris on here for, what is this? Let me count the number of minutes. That is 10. They brought her for 10 minutes. I'm 7 minutes through it. And we haven't heard a single thing about policies of hers. All we've heard are her response to comments from the Democratic frontrunner and the President of the United States, which again can be emblematic of policies depending on what they are, like the busing thing. And it's obvious that Biden doesn't oppose it now. So it's still kind of this thing where they just want her to keep denouncing something that somebody says rather than articulate her view on these issues. And that's really stupid. Like, I've said before that these different corporate news groups, particularly MSNBC and CNN, are trying to prop up these neoliberal candidates. They can't even do it in a smart way where they get them to come on there and actually talk about stuff that they're trying to change. They've literally brought her on here to talk for a third of half an hour just to flap her gums about stuff that other people are flapping their gums about. It's like, we don't care. Oh my God. Let's reconvene this stupidity.
Interference in the election of the president of the United States, which the American intelligence community has been very clear did happen. We have a commander-in-chief currently who prefers.
Also, like I've said before, they made it to where I don't even give a damn anymore about this Russia stuff, because the more I found out about the U.S. and its history of trying to rig and mess with elections, as well as our ongoing attempt to have a coup in Venezuela, it's just this at this point. And I'm not even saying that as someone that doubts that Putin tried to interfere. I just, it's been talked about so much to where I'm like, let's move on. It's kind of like the immigration thing where, yeah, you had me interested for a little while, but then you just kept flapping your gums about it to where I just got tuned out.
To take the word of a Saudi prince over the word of the American intelligence community when it comes to a journalist who was assassinated, a journalist who has American credentials.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about this. She's going to sit up here and be a crybaby because, admittedly, this is to the credit of people who are outraged about this. A journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, was murdered and killed in a very horrific, horrible way by the Saudi, their leadership, or rather their people that were under the employment of their leadership. But she's not going to get pissed. She's not going to express outrage and disdain and anger and anguish and all these other terms that we can find in the thesaurus regarding a literal genocide. There's a Twitter user I've mentioned before by the name of Jennifer, who is, I'd say, probably, to my knowledge, the most outspoken anti-Saudi led intervention in Yemen person I can think of, just being an outspoken opponent of that conflict. And I remember when that Khashoggi thing happened, when his assassination occurred and his disappearance, rather, was found out to later be a killing. She had mentioned to me, I can't believe that, something to the effect of, I can't understand how you can have thousands of people die in this foreign country by bombings, including small children that are purposely targeted and being starved to death, pictures available all over the internet, so it's a public domain issue. And the only time we get these senators to act like they give any kind of crap about what's going on is when one person, one journalist dies. Like, it was so insane because she couldn't fathom it and I couldn't. Like, we were just sitting there trying to wrap our brains together, and it just made no sense. But you see this exact thing with Harris, and what's so unfortunate about it is that because a large number of Americans either don't know about it or don't care about it, she's going to be able to go around this campaign trail talking about the horrible thing the Saudis did to Khashoggi, but then completely ignore the evil thing the Saudis did to Yemenis, or the citizens in Yemen, where they, again, literally killed tens of thousands of people, and it got no coverage because U.S. media is a joke.
I absolutely have concerns about this president meeting with anyone without an adequate kind of buffer and some guarantee that he is actually going to weigh whatever he receives in that conversation in a way that is in the best interest of national security and in the best interest of the people of our country. I think we have a good track record with this president to suggest that he may not actually be the best person to have judgment about how he should engage with and negotiate with foreign leaders.
Senator Harris, Senator Harris, I'm sure you haven't had a chance to look at all of the instant analysis to your performance tonight, but it's done. You've been declared the winner, a breakout. Joy Reid, who's really smart about all things political, says you're now sort of surging into the top tier. I wonder where you see yourself in this race and what you do next.
I am out here and will be out here working to earn the vote and the support of everyone. And this election will be given to no one. She who wins will have to earn it. And so the way that I will approach our campaign is tomorrow will be the same way it was today and the day before, which is to spend time with voters, to spend time with families, to listen, hopefully as much, if not more than I talk. Because I'll tell you, Nicole, I do fully intend to win this election, but my measure of our success will be also that at the end of this process, we are relevant. And I believe one of the most important ways to guarantee that is that I listen as much as I talk. And so that's the job and the task that I put before me.
Man, what a snooze fest. I said that earlier in the stream. They just talk and talk. And it's, at some point you got to just answer a question. They ask them, and it's a very simple question, what is your priority? What do you, and then just, people need to learn how to just give straight answers. Anyways, let me do this thing really quickly. Take this preview of this message on here. Really, I've basically made all the points I need to make about that little stupid interview. It's more garbage where they get these people to come up here and say all this stuff that's sort of, like it's the same outrage stuff. Oh man, horrible words were used. Who's a good person to top this off with, finish this off with? Let's see if I can find a quick thing, a snip of that goofy mayor. Because he actually got into some trouble. Actually, no, I'm not even going to do that. I'm just going to go and speak for the remainder of this. Because we're always trying to at least do our full power hour. But like I was saying, she had a perfect opportunity to sit here and reassert her dominance and go, this guy is not a good idea for a nominee. His refusal to condemn these comments and admit his mistake is a showing an example of his inability to get with times and change and adapt. And instead of doing that, she played softball. Oh, I don't think he's this. I'm not, like, you don't, like I said before, this is not a time for weak or little to no change. The nominee, whoever the hell it is, it should be Sanders, but people are stupid, so there's a good chance it won't be, needs to be able to articulate and express themselves in relation to these issues in a manner that is forceful, strong, assertive, and direct. See, here's the thing, and you saw this during the debate. People will give, for example, I gave Gabbard some flack because she didn't specify her opposition to the, like she didn't give numbers of stuff. She would go like, oh, this war killed dozens of people and thousands and millions. Okay, but can you give a specific number? Because I'm of the belief that when people have a certain number of what is to be expected of something, it's a lot easier to sell it to them because they can look it up and verify it. In the case of a lot of these people, I still gave her credit because she at least addressed an issue. They don't usually address an issue. When I say strong and forceful, I'm talking about saying, I will do this and this will be done by, X, Y, and Z. You get instead, well, I believe in the promise of the U.S. when it comes to this policy, and I'm willing to work with these people. No, you need to specify what your vision is and then give it. I think the best way to run for any office is to run as if you already are in that office, to give to people on the campaign trail what they can expect from you as president. And you're already seeing what you can expect from Harris if she wins the nomination, and God help us all, the presidency, which is this really weak, unable to stick to her word, compromising type president that we literally had just 2 years ago. And none of this has to do with being a Democrat. It's just you've got to understand you can't let them play with you. Like you wouldn't get this from Gabbard. She's polling really low now because of low name recognition, but you wouldn't get that from her because she would stick to her anti-war stance. And anyone that tried to mess with her thing or pass some war resolution in the Senate or the House, she would yank it. And you've seen that same commitment to being for world peace demonstrated through not just throughout the campaign, but throughout her whole congressional career. But you're not getting that kind of forcefulness from these people. It's really pathetic. I don't know which is worse, that they're actually being taken, like seen as serious candidates, or that I'm actually having to sit here and explain why they are so bad. Like it's it gets even more scary when you realize that there are actually people who don't understand this stuff, or that like think that I'm part of some secret Trump wing, that I'm like telling them all these things as some attempt to make them lose or whatever. It's so weird. People have all kind of three-dimensional chess thinking going on. It's really creepy too, because if I'm going around and saying I want this to happen, I want that to happen, it's not because it couldn't be because I want the other person to succeed, referring to to Trump. I have to clarify something with this person. And I guess lastly, just as kind of an announcement, I'm thinking of a format change, because I realize a lot of times through the week it's harder to record stuff because there's always the possibility of like someone being somewhere and making it a lot more difficult to just sit back and go, okay, here's my position on today's stuff. And unfortunately, that's kind of a problem with breaking news. Things that just happen, like how Friday I was just thinking I'm gonna put up this episode and I'll go to sleep, wake up, and then the thing on that website happens. So what I might do is, we're gonna have the Neoliberal Power Hour, maybe also next week, maybe something different, and then do news related stuff in a separate stream that's like later on in the day, or maybe right after, if I'm convinced that nothing is happening directly after doing this one. I know that sounds a little confusing. Basically, I would do one stream that I would actually post, and then one that would be like a live show, but then it would be like released in clips throughout the week. I think that's a decent format idea. I might do it today, might experiment with it next week. But I just think it's probably the best way to do this without like feeling so burnt out, because if it's all pushed back to back and then during the week I can just relax and not have to worry about what I'm going to put up because I have stuff already pre-planned, I think that's a better system. Again, we'll find out. But this election cycle has been really interesting. I've had to tell people that I don't care that much, because I'd rather focus on people and for the neoliberal power hours specifically, Democrats in Congress that I don't think are like actively doing things that are actually benefiting the U.S. Like Gerald Nadler, like that guy literally is known for just being a pro anti, just anything anti-Trump person. Just that's not appealing to me. Like you get what I'm saying. People who aren't really known for having any actual positions, except that they're opposed to whoever the president is. That kind of thing is aggravating. But he's liked just because of that, which again goes back to why I was saying that people are out of their minds when it comes to the. I don't even want to call it Trump derangement syndrome, because like I got accused of that too, and it was weird because I've criticized his opponents too because they do similar stuff, but that's a little, that's speaking over the heads of some people apparently. They don't want to hear. It's like you always think when they come on here and they ask stuff like that, or they try to say, what are you talking about? If you give them an explanation that is based in something you can prove, like, hey, here's a poll statistic, and then they still say no to it, then my hands are tied. I would say this was a pretty decent session. Like, I'm glad the audio issue wasn't here as it was last week. I decided not to put in our wonderful intro. So, what in the world? Okay, I don't know if you're asking a question or not. I like how someone decided to come literally where I'm ending. But look, I appreciate those who attended. I would have preferred if we had more people like last time. It is what it is. Have a good Saturday.